Yeah, what's going on, everybody? Good morning. Welcome to the Stochastic.com MLB Strategy Show presented by So Rare. Dave Loughran and Lafayette_D, joined by Adam Scherer. Ship My Money DFS for a little 11-game action on a Tuesday night. Happy to have you guys with us as always. Going to get into all of this today, but before we do, what's good, brother? How you doing?
Doing pretty well. DFS sucked yesterday, but looking forward to getting to another one.
Yeah, there's plenty of time to do that. Interesting slate. Millie Maker today as well.
Oh, I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, I think it's like $3,300 though.
I will not be playing it.
Anyway, got some fun stuff to get into. 11 games. Not gonna lie, was pretty happy to see that there were 4 games at 640 or in that time frame, so we didn't have like a 14 gamer.
Yes, I was happy about it, but probably for a different reason. I'm happy to have a 4-game slate with 10K to first.
Yeah, that's true. Have you been playing a lot of those like the early evening game slates when they have?
No, because usually there's only like 2. I usually don't bother unless there's like 3 or more. Preferably 4 or more.
Anyway, we got a lot to get into today. Happy to have you guys with us as always. And hey, if you haven't done so yet, take a single second, hit that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment down below. If you're listening in podcast form, we know you're out there. Leave a rating, a review, subscribe to the pod, all that good stuff, and we'll get into this. All right, so 11 games today. I want to hit this real quick. From a pitching perspective, and we can, of course, pull up MLB Top Stacks tool. We'll pull up the top pitchers tool and all of that good stuff. Does this look like a decent day for pitching out of the gate?
Yeah, solid number of names at the top that you actually want to roster. Using the top pitchers tool as sort of just an easy guide. I don't really see ownership going to anybody whose name I don't like. So that's always nice. You know, it sucks when you pull it up in the morning. It's like, 30% ownership going to, some random terrible pitcher. So it doesn't look like that kind of slate today. Some of the pitchers are in good matchups too. So yeah, pitching looks solid. It looked solid yesterday too, though. And then half of them were absolutely terrible.
Let's go ahead before we do. Oh, and I'll get to that in a little bit, as a matter of fact. Before we do, take a look at some Sims tool from yesterday. Pull up the brand new MLB Sims tool over at Stochastic.com. Get a look at what some of these simulated ROIs look like in the post-contest simulator. And of course, before we close this show out, we'll do the pre-contest sims as well and see what's showing up for us. Adam, just quickly before we do, for anyone that's brand new to this, when we're looking at this tool, the simplest way is, you're better than explaining this than I am when it comes to the Sims tool. Best way to read something like this and kind of evaluate this as we're going through the numbers for yesterday's slate.
So, I mean, it kind of depends what you're looking at, but if you're looking at user ROI, that's essentially just telling you, because the post-contest sim, you're using the actual lineups that were played, whereas in the pre-contest sim, you're simming the lineups that you submit. So the post-contest is saying, okay, this is what the field actually looked like. This is, how the lineups that you played fared. And being negative there doesn't mean you necessarily played bad lineups. It's more likely to mean that like the lineups you submitted weren't that good at approximating the field, or it can mean that you like use totally separate projections or something. But that's going to give you a gauge. Like, I think when you're using that, it's really important to sort of establish a baseline, like know what range your lineups are normally coming in, and then see what you can do to improve that, as opposed to necessarily like comparing yourself to somebody at whoever has the highest. I think that's a pretty useful way to do it. And then you get, your lineup ROI, stack ROI, player ROI. That's just telling you the lineup ROI. It's saying out of all of the lineups in the contest, when we simulated it using our projections, these lineups had the highest ROI. The stack ROI is, the same thing, but in terms of stacks. And then the player ROI is telling you essentially what players showed up in the best lineups the most often.
All right. And what do you make of this? So we're looking at the 300K relay throw, 100K to first. How often are you going to see this where, the highest simulated lineup ROI is going to be guys with like 1 and 2 lineups?
Pretty frequently. I mean, in theory, the fewer lineups you play, the higher as a collective your sim ROI is going to be. Not always the case, but you're going to see it a decent amount. Like on the one hand, a lot of times people playing one lineup are putting in really shitty lineups, so they're not going to move to the top. But a lot of times you also see people just play like contrarian lineups that actually end up being good, and they're just doing it in one lineup, and it's just going to show up at the top. So you'll see it a decent amount.
What I was thinking though is you'd probably see like more of this at the top with one or two lineups, but then also a ton of it at the bottom as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely, a ton of it at the bottom. That's what I was saying. Like you're going to randomly get a couple people that play one or two lineups, and they did play a really good lineup. If you were to look at it in terms of just only people that play one lineup, the vast majority are going to come in toward the bottom.
So looking at lineup ROI for yesterday, WPT 1982, Brown and Merrill Kelly pairing, Christian Vasquez, and I believe as far as player ROI goes, yeah, he had the highest sim player ROI. Christian Vasquez did, batting ninth with that 3-run homer for Minnesota. You have any of him?
I'm not sure. I don't think so.
I think he was only 3% owned. Joey Gallo, Estrada, Willie Castro, Kyle Farmer, Byron Buxton, Robert Jr., and Jake McCarthy. Any of these, looking at this too, I mean, we talked about Scherzer yesterday. He's in the second highest simulated ROI lineup at 187.1. Scherzer and Austin Gomber. Vasquez again. Vasquez in the top two, not in a couple of these others though, but it looks like there's a ton of Christian Vasquez. And yeah, I'm just kind of cursory look at some of these. Despite the fact that they're all up there with the highest simmed ROI, it definitely looks like there's a ton of diversity amongst these lineups at the top.
Yeah, and also if you like sort of combine lineup ROI with stack ROI, not surprising that Minnesota is coming in as the highest 5-man stack ROI based on what we're seeing in these top stacks. You have the top two teams are Minnesota 5-mans, I believe. No. 4-man. The second one's a Minnesota 4-man. First one's a Minnesota 5-man. But yeah, I think the big thing that you're seeing is that there's not red stacks at the top.
Yeah. Andy Mailman said, I love Adam's new Sims videos. Yeah, man. Good stuff. You can find them on YouTube and you can find them on Twitter. Been throwing them out in both places. Figure get as much reach as possible. All right. Two more things here. Player ROI. Vasquez, Buxton, Moreno, McCarthy. The list goes on here. There's a bunch of very positive simmed ROI players, but then stack ROI. What do you make of some of these negative stack ROIs? Looking at 5-man stacks on Pittsburgh -35, Cincy -22.8 in a very, it was a matchup, against Colorado at Great American. The Cubs -19, Texas -17, and White Sox -15 yesterday.
Yeah, I'm not surprised at all about Cincy. They were really, really popular. I didn't notice. I guess Texas was really popular too. Texas ended up being my highest owned stack, and I was pretty disappointed at how popular they did end up being. I hadn't really noticed it with the Pirates and the Cubs. I played a good amount of them as well. And when I looked at those stacks, I wasn't, taken aback by how popular they were or anything. So I'm a little surprised they're showing up as negative as they did, but it doesn't surprise me at all with Cincy and Texas, just because those teams were both pulling up so much ownership. Like Texas in spots ended up being almost as popular as Cincinnati did. You just had a lot of, 15 to 20% owned guys across the board. And that's just going to make it tough to win big tournaments. This tournament, I think, had 28,000 people in it. And if you have close to 40% of the field playing those two teams, it's just really hard to actually win the tournament with one of those teams. So it's not telling you like this team was going to fail a massive percent of the time or something. It's just telling you that even when they do well, it's really hard for your 5-man stacks to actually win out. So you're getting a lot of just losing lineups repeatedly because even when that stack does well, you're competing with so many people to get the top. So not too surprising to see them show up. And then on the other side, at the top, Minnesota coming in at the top. That was a team that we had talked about yesterday where Paxton was a really good play, but Minnesota did also have a lot of upside because they were cheap. They have good hitters. You had a watered down ball or a fatigued Boston bullpen potentially. So that was a team where they didn't get as much ownership as they probably deserved. It didn't come through, but if you played that slate over and over again, based on what the field did, there was a massive ceiling there. Milwaukee and Arizona both showing up a lot, both showing up second and third, where they didn't have good matchups, but they're still high upside spots in a good hitter's park that people just didn't go to.
Last thing on this. So if someone's looking at this Sims tool and they're new to it, by the way, link in the description and in chat if you guys wanted to sign up for the new MLB or PGA Sims tool. Definitely a revolutionary process here, as you can see. How much are you looking, like if you're going back and look at the post contest sim, how much stock are you putting into, like, or how are you evaluating would probably be a better question for this, like 3, 4, and 5 man? Are you looking at something specifically? Are we generally going to see these in alignment where it's 3, 4, and 5 man, all positive or negative simmed ROI?
Yeah, I think you're typically going to see them in alignment. I don't pay too much attention to it because I generally only run 5 mans on DraftKings. But yeah, like you're typically going to see it in alignment. The only spot where I would think that it would vary some potentially is like where you have teams where you have like 2 really good plays and the rest of the team sucks or something like that. But most of the time, if you have 2 or 3 really good plays from a team, their stacks are still, a 5-man stack isn't going to be that difficult to get to anyway. So like sort of an example, not perfect because they had like 4 or 5 really good plays, but the White Sox negative 19% 5-man, still a negative 17 or negative 18% 3-man. So like I could have seen maybe a situation where it's like, well, Vaughn, Robert, Berger is really good, but the 5-man stack when you add Elvis Andrus and Benintendi sucks. But like still didn't in this case. And I think you would probably end up seeing it more if it was like you had Robert and Jake Berger and then just like a team full of guys that couldn't hit it all.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it makes sense. What about the fact where you've got like 5-man Milwaukee at 15.4% ROI, 4-man stack at 13, and then 3-man only at 3%?
Yeah, that's interesting. So it's still the second highest 3-man.
True. I guess so it's just the 3-man stack ROI in general wasn't that.
Right, because that's I don't know actually exactly what it's running. Like I don't know if I assume it's counting 3-man secondary stacks, but like if it's just counting 3-man primary stacks, obviously those are just gonna be pretty bad lineups. But I assume it's secondary stacks. But still, you're just I think it's when you get to the 3-man secondary stack, it's not going to have as much of an impact as your primary stack did. So like you're still having Milwaukee guys show up as positive, but if you went 3 Milwaukee guys with like 5 Reds, the Reds are still going to be pulling that down.
All right. Well, there it is. We'll do this each morning to start off, and then the pre-contest sim at the end of the show. I really think you guys are going to enjoy that for sure. We already got that ran, so we'll do it at the end. Link in the description, chat, MLB Sims. Check it out, man. It's awesome. All right, let's get into some baseball today. Glad you guys are hanging out with us. Almost at 50 likes out of the gate already, so appreciate you in advance. We know who the people atoning for their sins early in the day are, looking to start the day off on the right foot, and you already have. All right, so we'll kick it off with Seattle and the New York Yankees. Really, really solid pitching matchup here. Kirby for Seattle, Garrett Cole for the New York Yankees. 7-run total in this game, though, Adam. So I don't think we're going to be, despite the fact that the Yankee Stadium can play hitter friendly, I don't think we're going to be pulling a ton of bats from this game. But let's get into Kirby and Garrett Cole here. Any interest in loading up on pitching from this game and the lowest total of the night?
Yeah, the pitching looks really good. 3.3 implied run total for Seattle, 3.7 for the Yankees. 2 really good pitchers. I am a little bit surprised that you're getting so much more ownership coming into Cole compared to Kirby. We have Cole right now as the highest owned pitcher on the slate on DraftKings at 33%. He's also the second most expensive pitcher behind Eovaldi at 10.9. Whereas you have George Kirby for $2,200 less, getting 1/3 the ownership. So I think Cole's a really good play. He's highest top 2 pitcher percentage on the slate. I don't have any issue with that. It was just, at that price tag, I'm a little surprised he's getting as much ownership as he is, but that could also very simply just speak to there being good value bats on the slate. Kirby at 8,700, a little bit of a discounted price tag for him. The Yankees without Aaron Judge are a totally different offense. Their active roster has a 92 WRC plus, 22% strikeout percentage. Kirby himself isn't a great strikeout pitcher, but he doesn't walk guys. He's good at limiting runs. 22% strikeout percentage, 1.9% walk percentage this year, 3.49 xFIP. Because of that low walk percentage, his K minus BB percentage is 20.1%. That's essentially the same as Nathan Eovaldi. It's better than Garrett Cole. It's similar to Framber Valdez. Like the gap there is still massive. So Kirby certainly looks good. I understand why Cole's getting more ownership. 26.5% K percentage, 3.86 xFIP. Seattle's active roster has a 100 WRC plus against right-handed pitching, but also a 25% strikeout percentage. It just looks like a good spot for pitching. And it's also like low 70s in New York, so you don't have the 85, 90 degree weather that we've been seeing off and on recently.
Man, Kirby's an absolute inning eater too. I know he's had a few games where he fell off against San Diego. He struggled immensely against Pittsburgh. Prior to that, though, he'd been absolutely tearing through opponents. And he's coming off a scoreless 6-inning game with 10 Ks against Miami. 8,700 does seem kind of odd on a guy who, you know what it is about him? You look at him and you go, all right, he doesn't have the highest K rate in the league. You know, he doesn't have, you know, the most elite swing and miss stuff, but he's a legitimately fantastic pitcher who can go super deep into games. $8,700. It does kind of stand out when you consider the fact that the upside he still has is considerable. He's got like 3 or 4 30+ fantasy point games at 8,700.
Yeah, and to your point, it's important to keep in mind, like, yeah, the strikeout percentage is not bad. It's just, you know, average-ish.
22%.
Yeah, the
1.9% walk rate, by the way.
Yeah, I said that.
Sorry.
The trade-off though is that, so like, he's still striking out, you know, a good amount of hitters, but because he doesn't walk anybody and he's not striking out, a million guys, he's not necessarily spending that many pitches per at bat. And so you go back and you look at some of these starts: 6 innings on 92 pitches, 8 innings on 95 pitches, 7 innings on 88 pitches, 8 innings on 97 pitches. It just allows him to get deeper into games. And it's not a situation where like Miami with Alcantara last year, where he's getting deep in the games because they just don't care if he throws 110 pitches. He doesn't have that leash in terms of pitch count, but he's just so efficient that he's able to work deep in the games. And that helps make up some of that gap in strikeout percentage between him and some of these top tier pitchers. So I am surprised that the salaries as low as it is and the ownership's as low as it is. It is a pretty big negative park shift for him going from T-Mobile to Yankee Stadium, but still looks really good at this price tag. Like, you look at some of the pitchers priced around him. Aaron Savali's getting more ownership than him, $800 less. Good matchup against Oakland. I get it. Dylan Cease is a whole different conversation, but he's $1,000 less, getting more ownership against Texas. Ben Lively's getting a bunch of ownership for $1,600 less against Colorado. So you don't really have many guys directly in Kirby's price range. It does seem like a lot of times you're either going to be going a little bit cheaper or a little bit higher. So maybe that's why the ownership's a little bit limited. But overall, he looks good, and I'm happy to get there at 12%.
45% ground ball rate too. Like it should play okay in this.
The command is really good.
It's amazing.
Yeah. If anybody who doesn't follow the Pitching Ninja Twitter account, I highly recommend it. Just really entertaining.
That's just because he quote tweeted you one day.
Yeah, that too. But no, just really entertaining stuff. But I don't remember how many starts ago it was. He had put up just a clip of George Kirby just like living on the edges of the strike zone. Like, every strike he threw in the start or something, like, it was something ridiculous. Like, every strike he threw in the start was like on the edge. Like, it was just unbelievable.
To what you mentioned earlier, 3.7 pitches per plate appearance, 4th best in the league. So yeah. Red Skittles said there needs to be a bit. Laffy just constantly repeating what Adam just said. Let me be fair. Adam does this as well. I just let him slide.
I do it constantly.
I know. I know. And a lot of times I'm just like, yeah, I said that, but we're okay. It's all right. We're on the same plane here. It's no big deal. Any bats from this
game? Neil does it to me constantly on the strategy shows too. It's like for anybody that doesn't know,
because you're looking stuff up when it's not like I'm intentionally, anyone's intentionally. We're trying to provide as much information as possible.
Right. The reason the show flows well is because while I'm talking, he's pulling up the next game. Then while he's introducing me, I'm pulling up what I'm going to say, and we're not listening to each other.
Right. Otherwise, it would be like, all right, let me.
Right now, the next game. Let me see who's playing next.
Right. You don't get seamless transitions like this anywhere else, my friends. This is why you tune into the Stochastic MLB Strategy Show. By the way,
It's
you
like the
see that?
epitome of when like you're sitting at the bar talking to somebody and you're that annoying person that's like thinking about what you're gonna say
I
while
hate
they're
those
talking
people.
to you.
But this is different because like if you and I were having a real conversation, you and I are actually having a conversation.
Right.
It's a different format in a show, but there is nothing worse than someone who is only listening to what you're saying so they can relate it back to themselves.
Yeah. Or just like not even listening to what you're saying
Yeah,
so that they can say whatever they wanted to say. But yeah, like if you and me are just sitting there talking, nobody cares if we sit there, if like you say something and I'm like, okay, I didn't think about that. Let me think for 30 seconds and respond. Like that makes for a really boring show if we're taking 30-second breaks every time.
But it makes for a really boring show if like we're taking 30-second breaks at a time and you're
exactly.
Did you see that submarine that went down to view the Titanic?
I didn't see it. I don't think anybody has.
Yeah, I think it just eviscerated.
Did you read like so
the
somebody
controller?
What? Yeah.
Oh, it's
so,
controlled by like a PlayStation 3 controller.
Yeah, like somebody there was like an article from somebody that had checked it out and they were like, it kind of feels like it was just like MacGyvered and it's just like being held together by like nothing.
And it cost $250,000 to take a trip.
Yeah. The big takeaway for me, did you know that Titanic was that close to Massachusetts?
No, is that where it is?
It's 900 miles off the coast of Cape Cod.
I knew it was in the Atlantic. I
know it was in the Atlantic, but like I thought it was up by like Greenland or something.
Really? Yeah, I don't know. I'd love to go there, by the way.
The Titanic?
No, it's a Greenland.
Oh, I'd like to go to Iceland.
Also, there's some conspiracy theories out there that it wasn't.
No way.
It was. What's that?
I said no way.
that it wasn't actually the Titanic. That like this was an insurance thing that they sank it on purpose, and it was the sister ship that's actually down there.
So where's the Titanic?
I don't fucking know, dude. I didn't look into it. I just saw it on Twitter. All right. Next game, unless you got any bats you want to talk about here.
Nope.
All right. Let's talk about the Chicago Cubs, Pittsburgh Pirates, Marcus Stroman, Johan Oviedo. 8-run total in this one, pitcher-friendly PNC Park. Let's dive into it. Stroman's another one of those guys. Just an absolutely preposterous ground ball rate for Marcus Stroman. Like if you ever wanted just a really good pitcher who isn't going to be a DFS stud, but is just a good pitcher through and through, Marcus Stroman is 100% your guy. And he has actually had some quality fantasy performances lately. He's right around the same price as Kirby going up against his Pittsburgh team. But again, 21.6%. I mean, he actually is similar to Kirby in the sense that similar K rate. Both of them get a lot of ground. He has a 60% ground ball rate though, which is just mind blowing. And he goes very deep into games. What do you make of him today in this spot in a better park?
Yeah, similar pitcher to Kirby for sure. Like you said, he actually has pretty solid strikeout numbers against righties this year, striking out around 25%. Against lefties, not striking out a lot of guys. Doesn't give up production to either side of the plate. So good real life pitcher. I think it's just tough to get to him at like if you go to him, it's purely as a contrarian play. Can he have a good game here? Absolutely. 3.8 implied run total, good pitcher, all of that. But you kind of run in the same problem that I was talking about with Kirby, where I think in a lot of roster builds, you're going to either prefer saving money to like Cease, Savali, Lively, or spending more money to the Cole, Kershaw, Valdez tier. You run into the same thing with Stroman, but then the problem is even if you do decide to stay in that range, he projects below Kirby. So he's only getting 3% ownership, which makes him somebody that if you need a low-owned, solid guy in tournaments, perfectly fine. But it's more of like an individual lineup play here and there than me thinking I'm going to start just playing a bunch of Marcus Stroman today.
All right. Yeah. Someone said, where would you hide the Titanic? Dude, no, it doesn't work like that. You would just make it look like the other one. From what I believe is the Titanic itself suffered, or the Olympic itself suffered bad damage and like insurance claims or something. So they made it look like the Titanic and then sunk it or something like that.
What's the Olympic?
Was the sister ship.
What's that mean?
Like, I'm assuming the ship that was, almost identical in nature.
But it wasn't like on that trip.
What's that?
It wasn't like on the same like voyage.
No.
Okay.
It was
Yeah, I'll
just
say
like
because I don't remember the name of the ship that rescued them, but it wasn't the Olympic. But okay,
SM.
I'm following now.
Yeah,
So
no,
yeah, so the conspiracy theory is that you had this damaged ship, you made it look like the Titanic, you let it sink, and then you just make the Titanic look like the Olympic.
and collected the insurance.
Right.
Yeah, I think. I don't know, but yeah, exactly. You didn't just like blow the actual Titanic up or something like that. That would
Right.
defeat the purpose.
Right. Now you're missing two ships.
Yeah, exactly. Chicago and Pittsburgh bats today. Unless you want to talk about Oviedo, he is getting a decent amount of value in the top pitchers tool, but 6% ownership, not a ton happening here.
Yeah, if you need to pay all the way down, he's viable. There's a couple guys down there. You have him. You have Cutter Crawford at 5,400 against Minnesota. Detmers is a little bit more expensive against the Dodgers at 6,900. These guys are all pulling like 6 to 10% ownership. Perfectly fine if you need to pay down, but this isn't a case where like Oviedo is really good and I can't believe he's 6,200. This isn't Brian Wu or one of the Millers from earlier in the year. This is just like a punt play if you need it, but probably won't need to get there very often.
And then Pittsburgh, I don't think we need to spend any time on Pittsburgh bats here at all. Stroman's,
I prefer not to roster guys that are just going to smash the ball into the ground.
Yeah, I was going to say Stroman might be the worst pitcher to stack against in the league right now.
Yeah, it's not good. So lefties this year, 102 expected ISO, righties 112, 285 expected WOBA to righties, 317 to lefties.
Any interest in Cubs bats?
Not a lot. Oviedo really hasn't been bad in terms of limiting power. 144 expected ISO to lefties, 116 to righties. Not a great park. Looks like supposed to be around 80 today, so a little bit cooler than yesterday as well. If I have to go to an offense from this game, I would go to the Cubs first, but nothing really. They're cheap-ish. Like there's that. Nico Horner's pretty expensive. Swanson and Bellinger. So they're actually still just weird like they were yesterday. Horner, Swanson, Bellinger, Morel are all expensive. And then Talkman, Suzuki, Happ are all like probably $500 cheaper than they should be, at least. So kind of a spot where you could get some value, but I think there's just going to be enough other spots on the slate.
Talk about St. Louis and Washington. Yeah, we got a ton of games that we're going to get to, several of them with much higher totals, a handful of 9s, a 10 at Great American. So we'll get there for sure. But let's talk about St. Louis and Washington first. Jordan Montgomery on the mound for the St. Louis Cardinals. Washington, though, active roster, 18.3% K rate against lefties. That's fourth lowest in the league. Jordan Montgomery not getting a ton of ownership here. And also you're getting him at a, mid-range $7,400 price point. But I think you and I have talked about this a lot. Washington just, not a great offense. They have performed better against lefties, 106 WRC plus on the active roster versus lefties, which is middle of the league. Pretty much middle of the league everywhere except strikeouts, where they don't strike out a whole lot. Is Montgomery someone you think is an interesting play today, or someone you won't have much of?
I probably won't have much. I think he's a reasonable tournament play at 7% ownership. You look in that price range, you have Savali for $500 more pulling 3 times the ownership. You have Cease for $500 or $300 more pulling like two to 3 times the ownership. Those guys both project better, but they're close enough where, similar to Stroman, if you just have a chalky lineup and you need to save some ownership, Jordan Montgomery is fine. The Nats, going back to the start of last season against left-handed pitching, their active roster, 94 WRC plus, 21% K percentage. Not a great offense, not a horrible offense against lefties. Like they're going to hit lefties better than they hit righties typically, and they don't strike out a lot. So middle of the road matchup, all things considered. I don't have a problem with Montgomery. I just like other pitchers more.
Do you have any interest in Gore on the other side? It's not the best matchup. He does have good strikeout stuff, though.
Yeah, I was going to say he's kind of similar to Montgomery, just in a different way, but similar type play where he projects below guys like Cease and Savali. It's not an easy matchup. The Cardinals' active roster since last year has a 126 WRC plus, only a 19% K percentage against lefties. Really, really tough spot. But if you just look at raw strikeout stuff, 27.5% strikeout percentage. The only pitchers on this slate with better K rates this year are Clayton Kershaw and Reed Detmers. 3.68 xFIP for Gore. Like, it's not even like he's a good strikeout pitcher that gets bombed. He's a legitimately good pitcher. and he has the pedigree to back it up as well. He was a key part of the Juan Soto trade, but at 8K, this is just still a spot where it's a really tough matchup. The one, I guess, point you could make in Gore's favor, like you compare him to Dylan Cease. Cease is facing Texas. That's not any easier than facing St. Louis. And, Gore has a higher strikeout percentage than Cease this year. He's been a better pitcher than Cease this year. Cease obviously has a track record of being a better pitcher, but that's, I guess, where it kind of gets interesting. Like Savali's a little different just because, he's not a huge strikeout guy, but he's facing Oakland. But when you look at Cease versus Gore specifically, Cease does project better, but they both have brutal matchups. They're both good strikeout pitchers, and one's just getting way more ownership.
What do you make of these splits versus lefties, looking at ex-Woba and ISO again, fastball and slider? They have 552 Woba, 507 ex-Woba on the fastball against lefties for Gore this season. Slider, 397 ex-Woba, 307 ex-ISO. But again, it's a pretty small sample. That's on like 230 pitches or 330 pitches total.
Yeah, it's a small sample. I assume it's going to turn around. Doesn't have to, but the one thing for me is that the pitches he throws that have been getting hit hard are pitches that are typically good against same-handed hitters. It's not like he's a big changeup guy and he's throwing it to same-handed and it's like leaking back into the plate and getting crushed. He's fastball slider to lefties. Typically, that's going to end up being good against same-handed hitters, especially when you consider that he's having success against opposite-handed hitters. Like he's thrown his slider 16% of the time to righties, sub 100 expected ISO, 17% swinging strike percentage. So he's having success with it in general. Probably a small sample size thing. In terms of DFS, for one, it doesn't really matter because the Cardinals are probably going to have like one lefty in their lineup. But the way I kind of view it there is I wouldn't be actively looking to take lefties against him because it is likely that as the sample grows that balances out. But I wouldn't be shying away from them. Like if I'm stacking a team, again, the Cardinals aren't the example, but if I'm stacking a team where two of their best hitters are left-handed, I'm going to feel perfectly fine about, clicking them in the middle of the stack.
Any other bats here you want to get into?
No, not a game that I really like the bats too much. The Cardinals, from an upside standpoint, certainly look good. We actually have them with the highest top stack percentage right now, which is a thing. I think that comes down, but 4.6 implied run total. I think it's a high upside spot. I don't think it's the most likely spot on the slate to succeed because, again, Gore is solid overall, 157 expected ISO, 296 expected WOBA to righties with a 27.5% K percentage.
I talked about this a lot in our chalkboard app the other day. Didn't pan out, but looking at Oakland and Cleveland, Oakland plus 190 on the road against Cleveland. God, that says a lot. But by the way, join our chalkboard app if you guys aren't there yet. The link is in the description too. It's all free, all of it. And yeah, it's right there. All of the picks. Dude, we've been sweating tennis bets, locking them in at like 6:30 in the morning using the Odd Shopper tool. Had some great golf bets this week. Greg and I throwing out tennis bets. We don't even know tennis, but we're getting good odds on Odd Shopper, finding the best plus EV spots and throwing them in there. Everything's free. The app is free. The whole community, everything. Like-minded people who enjoy sports betting, who enjoy DFS, who enjoy, free picks and sweating together and all of that stuff. So if you're not there yet, join the 2,300 plus of us in there having a wonderful time every day and help us build this community because I think you'll love it. It's been a lot of fun and everyone's super supportive in there, unlike most of those betting communities where everyone just shit talks and tells everybody why they're dumb. All right. But yeah, definitely jump in there with us. Link in the description. Everything's free forever. It's not like a free trial or whatever. It's just a community that we're building. Yeah. So what I was saying didn't work out last time was just Medina had been crushed by righty power. And you had all of these power righties in the Tampa lineup last time. I know it wasn't the best park in Oakland. They won. He gave up some runs, but they didn't find a way to, really produce a considerable amount of power. Now you've got an Indians team that certainly doesn't have that same power. What's that? Oh, you said no. Scattered throughout the entire lineup, right?
No, I said what team?
Oh.
I was listening to that one.
Listen, man, you gotta give me at least 2 years to
Hasn't
start.
It been 2 years?
What?
Hasn't it been 2 years?
Yeah, but I've only been doing MLB shows this year. I took 2 years.
Oh, so you need 2 years worth of.
I need 2 years from now.
Got it.
Yeah. So the Guardians have the second lowest ISO on the active roster against righties this season. Really, the question isn't, do we want to get a lot of Medina? Because the answer to that, unless you have some insane like Megamind type thoughts here, is no, because Cleveland doesn't strike out. That's the one thing they're good at. But do you think we can pull some players from this Cleveland Indians lineup and say, look, don't love the stack, but there's some individual bats here that profile really well against a bad righty?
Yeah, I mean, Cleveland as a stack even looks really good here. Medina's not good. You're getting a negative park shift for him. Now, Cleveland isn't great for home runs, 99 WRC plus or 99 park factor, 4 home runs over the last 3 seasons, but slightly better than Oakland. You also don't have the massive foul territory, so that's nice. In terms of run scoring, again, slightly better than Oakland. So a little bit of a negative park shift here for Medina, and he just is also really, really bad. Cleveland, again, it's not a particularly good lineup, but you do have Jose Ramirez, which is nice. Medina so far this year, 249 expected ISO and a 360 expected WOBA to righties, 380 expected WOBA, 192 expected ISO to lefties. You're probably going to have a predominantly lefty lineup. Ahmed Rosario and Miles Straw, the only righties in the projected lineup I'm looking at. Rosario at 3,400 is going to look like a very good shortstop play. Ramirez looks great at third base. One negative to stacking them is that you do have Naylor and Bell at the same position. They're both good plays. Naylor is $1,100 more expensive than Bell, but it makes it so you most likely won't be able to 5-man stack 1 through 5 on DraftKings. But still, like, you just skip one of them. You play Jimenez, you play Will Brennan. Really, really high upside spot. We have them third in top stack percentage right now. Again, I think they should be higher than the Cardinals at least. But they're getting ownership. They should. It's a good spot. Whether or not you play them really just is going to come down to, the ownership and exactly how much of it you're willing to take on.
Jake DeWitt had a good question. He said, Adam, at what point during the season do you use stats from this season instead of looking at stats since the start of last season? It's a good question, but there's nuance to that too, because certain teams are just like, if you're looking at teams, certain teams are just wildly different than they were last year and some aren't.
Yeah. So there's 2 parts to that too. As far as for the stats I'm using when I'm playing, I don't, because projections are going to always be including previous year's data. But like the only time I'm referencing stats like this is to try and explain why projections are the way they are on shows. As far as when I'm going to switch on shows, it's kind of depends on what stats we're talking about. Like for pitchers, I'm already just using this year, especially for like strikeout percentage, because that stabilizes pretty quickly. For teams, for like against right-handed pitching, I've only been using, like I'm just talking about this year. For lefties, I go back to last year just because you see fewer left-handed pitchers. So it's going to take longer to get enough at bats. So it depends on the stat, but also kind of depends on what your question is. If you're talking about when I build my lineups, then never, because I'm not like actually looking at any of this stuff. I'm using projections and everything. In terms of talking on shows, it kind of depends what stat.
So we talk Cleveland bats, definitely an interesting spot against a pretty bad righty. I guess I do have to ask you on the other side of this one, Aaron Savali, 20% ownership right now, $7,900 on DraftKings against a bad Oakland offense who will strike out at a pretty good clip. What are your thoughts on Savali here?
Good spot, solid enough pitcher, $7,900 price tag. He's thrown at least 90 pitches in each of his last 2 starts. Came back from injury 3 starts ago, so good to see him, quickly getting stretched out. He only went 3 2/3 against the Padres last start, but again, 95 pitches. He just wasn't that effective. He went 5 2/3 against Boston in the previous start, 93 pitches there. So good matchup, very reasonable price tag. He hasn't pitched much this season. So far, he has only struck out 19.5% of hitters, 4.4 xFIP. I'm trying to pull up his page now. I think last year he was around like 22-ish percent strikeout percentage. I think he had a sub 4 xFIP or was in that ballpark. So overall, a solid enough pitcher. 20 starts last year, 97 innings pitched. 24% strikeout percentage, even higher than I remembered. 3.87 FIP. Overall, just a good spot for him. If you wanted to turn some of his 20% ownership into like Jordan Montgomery for $500 less in your more popular lineups, that's perfectly fine. But I do expect him to be one of the more popular and one of my more higher owned, value SP2s.
We heard about him too. 7% swinging strike rate through his first 5 starts this year.
Yeah, he's had some not great matchups in there. So his first 3 starts were Seattle, Minnesota. Those teams we know will strike out a bit, but then he faced Boston, then he faced San Diego. Not the easiest matchup, especially in his stretch since coming back from injury.
All right. Any other bats worth talking about here?
I mean, Oakland's cheap. If you need them, you probably don't. Savali's not like he's a solid pitcher, but he's not somebody where like you could never take bats against him. So, if a little bit of Noda, Rooker, Brown shows up, fine, but probably won't really need it too much on an 11 gamer.
Let's talk about Colorado and Cincinnati. Highest total on the slate, 10 runs at Great American. Noah Davis, Ben Lively, 2 righties on the mound. Cincinnati, pretty significant favorites at home. We'll get this out of the way first. Ben Lively, at the current time, looking at our top pitchers tool. By the way, you guys, 50% off all of our tools. If you hear us reference the top pitchers tool, the top stack tool, ownership, top batters tool, all of that stuff, 50% off. Whether you wanted to do a week for just baseball, a month for just baseball, or a week or month for every sport that you want, we got you covered from top to bottom. MMA, MLB, PGA in full swing right now. Everything, right? NASCAR, tennis, every sport. Like it may feel like the dog days of summer without NBA and football, but there's a million other sports. And if you're looking at this going, I don't know these sports, I know Adam and I have said it many times before, sometimes not knowing those sports and not allowing yourself to inject that personal bias into all of your decision-making for your lineups and just relying on the tools to give you the right answers. Once you figure out how to properly utilize all the tools on the site, just a massive, massive difference. So don't look at this and go, oh, I only have baseball. And if that's all you want, yeah, we got it every day. A lot of other sports out there with a lot of huge prize pools. I mean, some of Adam's biggest wins, I think Adam's biggest win came in MMA.
Golf.
Was it golf and then MMA? What was your MMA finals win?
Because I chopped, it was 75K.
Oh, okay. All right. Golf was the one. Well, golf was the 200.
Golf was 150 and the 25 in the same weekend.
But you would agree that golf is certainly not your most proficient knowledge base.
I don't know shit about golf or MMA.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah.
The only sport I know anything about outside of DFS is baseball, really.
And basketball.
I mean, like I know basketball, but like I don't know. I know basketball from a DFS standpoint. I can't break down X's and O's of basketball. I can talk about rotations all day.
Right. But yeah, check it out. Link in the description and in chat, 50% off literally anything, weekly or monthly, any sport you want. You're getting half off the top, all these tools, and you're getting access to the premium Discord. If you guys aren't signed up and you're not in there yet, join the family. Check out the tools. You will love them. Ben Lively, though, 15% top 2 probability in the top pitchers tool, 21% ownership, -6% leverage today, but he is a decent value at 7,100 against a bad Rockies offense. How do you kind of square this with somebody like Ben Lively, given that he's cheap in a good matchup, but also getting a lot of ownership?
It scares me. So Lively's a tough pitcher because he spent the last few years in the KBO. So it's really tough to get quality to be confident in your projections on guys like this, because like it's a different league. It's just different, and you don't really know what he's bringing over. He's been solid so far, though. I didn't expect him to be, and there's still a chance that he just falls off. But so far in his starts this year, 25% K percentage, 4 flat xFIP, only walking 5.8% of hitters. He has had some power issues. He's allowed almost 2 home runs per 9 innings, 181 expected ISO to righties, 188 to lefties. But overall, he's been a good pitcher this year. He's still only $7,100, and now you have a good matchup against the Rockies. 4.2 implied run total. Their active roster this year against right-handed pitching has a 93 WRC plus and a 25% K percentage, and that's including the games they've played against right-handed pitchers in Coors Field. So
that's crazy.
Gives you an idea of how unbelievably bad this offense is. Lively looks good at 7,100. He probably should be like 8,100 or something. Again, you're not super confident in his skill set holding up going forward, but it is a good spot against the Rockies. He does look like a good play. Again, from a pivot standpoint, you do have guys you can get to. You can very easily play Jordan Montgomery instead of him if you want to save a bunch of ownership. But same for like Reed Detmers. But you should be getting to Lively a pretty good amount.
Man, he's sitting 90 miles per hour on the fastball.
Yeah,
huh?
I can't really point to any reason why he's going to keep being good, but
He's getting a lot of whiffs on his slider. I can say that much, but like,
yeah, and that is his most thrown pitch to righties. He's throwing it 37% to righties, 16% swinging strike percentage, 25% K rate against righties. Lefties striking out 21.5%.
but yeah, he's certainly not throwing gas. Not that you need to.
Yeah, it just makes life easier.
Any interest on the other side of this one? Noah Davis. My assumption would be no.
Your assumption would be correct.
Do you have interest in Colorado bats though? Just knowing that Lively, maybe this isn't sustainable. And two, even if it is, he still gives up power.
Yeah, a little bit. It's a good park too. So you do have Colorado going a bit under owned, 5.5% ownership, aggregate ownership, 6% chance of being the top stack. But on top of that, a 9.9% chance of being the top value stack. So we actually have them coming in third in stack score, where you're combining the top stack and top value metrics. And then, on top of that, it is an added bonus that you're facing a pitcher that is like 20% owned. So if I could only choose one side, I'd probably go Lively first. But the Rockies are a good tournament play because there is volatility here. It is a good hitter's park. This is a team where it's very difficult to point to individual bats and say like, oh, I really like this guy. But as a stack, they can certainly get there. Individually, McMahon and Jones are probably my favorite two hitters, but nothing wrong with running out, Profar, Grichuk, McMahon, Jones, Alfaro, and just hoping that Ben Lively struggles.
Cincinnati Reds, on the other hand, second highest top stack percentage on the slate behind only the St. Louis Cardinals right now. Decent top stack score. Stack score in the top stack tool. I think it's fourth best on an 11-game slate. As you mentioned, pretty great park here, but they are also really popular, Adam. I'm going to be interested to see at the end of the show when we run this pre-contest sim where some of these stacks like Cleveland and Cincinnati are showing up.
Yeah, for sure. And this is a good spot again against Noah Davis. The Rockies are they're the opposite of the Braves. Like I was saying the other day, I wish that we would just stop getting Braves slates. I wouldn't mind not getting slates where the Rockies are pitching either, because they're just bad across the board. And Noah Davis is another one. Projects to be absolutely awful rest of the season. The bat projects him for a 16% K percentage, 10% walk percentage, 5.87 FIP. ATC's projection systems at 17.5% K percentage, 6.11 FIP. It's another really good spot for the Reds. They have a near 6 implied run total. They're not super cheap, but for a team with a near 6 implied run total, they're not that expensive either. Ellie De La Cruz is the only hitter on DraftKings north of 5K. And there's obviously no problem getting to him. You also have plenty of MPE with De La Cruz, McLean, and Steer all having multi-positions. You have Joey Votto back. It looks like a very, very good stack for Cincy. The only question is just, how does the ownership end up working out?
All right, let's talk about Boston and Minnesota. Cutter Martin Crawford. What a name. His Instagram is Crawdaddy1. Bailey Ober, you like either pitchers in this spot today? We're kind of late on time since we spent time on the Sims today, so I'll throw this one over to you.
In tournaments, they're fine. Neither one is a huge priority. Ober is a good pitcher, tough matchup, still sub 4 implied run total for Boston. He's getting 2% ownership. The problem is just that, you look at the pitchers ahead of him that are getting modest ownership. George Kirby, Aaron Savali, Dylan Cease, Lively. You could make the case that he's going under owned relative to any of those guys, but in terms of actual lineups you're playing, it's probably going to be pretty tough to get much of him. Crawford as a paydown option is fine. He's $5,400, really cheap price tag. He has a 26.5% K percentage as a starter this year, 3.32 xFIP. He's been solid. You're facing a Twins lineup that has plenty of power, has plenty of upside, but does also strike out a lot. You got 80 pitches from him over 4 innings against Colorado his last time out. So not super limited here, especially for a $5,400 guy. If you need to pay down, I do like getting the Crawford. But again, in most builds, you're probably just going to be able to get 2 of the more expensive pitchers.
Oh, you're done speaking?
Yeah, I thought I had something else to say. Then I realized I'd already talked about Ober, so I just stopped.
Gotcha. Okay, so I'm not crazy to think that you...
Yeah, no, I said it like I was going to follow it up, and then I realized I already said what I was going to say.
All good. Bailey Ober, anything else you want to talk about for pitching here, or do you want to get to some bats?
No, we can go to the bats.
All right. Right now, just looking at the top stacks tool, you've got Boston Yeah, wow. Boston, 2% ownership here, low stack score. Not a huge surprise. Minnesota against Cutter Crawford, minus 3.2% leverage, getting around 6% ownership, but only a top 2% top stack probability for the Minnesota Twins today.
Yeah, that's another that one's hard for me to buy. So as far as the ownership goes, it's a little bit misleading. Buxton's pulling 10%. Edward Julian at 3,100 is pulling 10%. Correa at 4,300 is 9%. Everybody else is 5 or less. So as a stack, they're going to be pretty low owned. They have a 4.6 implied run total here. It's supposed to be close to 90 degrees in Minnesota. Cutter Crawford has been good overall this year, like I said, but he has had issues with left-handed power specifically. Only a 269 expected WOBA to lefties with a 32.5% K percentage, but a 210 expected ISO. A small sample, but it looks like, overall he's got good stuff. He's got the ability to limit production, but probably just having some command issues where he's having pitches leak back over the plate and get blasted when he does miss his spot. So at the very least, you do have some upside here where you have Julian, you have Kirilloff, you have Kepler, you have Gallo, all from the left side. Obviously, Buxton and Correa, right-handed, but still really good high upside plays. Royce Lewis, high ceiling guy. So really cheap Minnesota team. The only two hitters in the projected lineup above $4,000 are Correa at 4,300 and Buxton at 5K flat. So I do like Minnesota stacks where you're not going to Crawford.
Cutter Crawford's from Okeechobee, Florida, Adam.
That's like country Florida, right?
You would think. I just looked it up on a map, and
I know there's a lake.
Lake Okeechobee. I looked up how big it is. 730 square miles.
Yeah, it's massive.
Seems big, but, and I'll have you guys know, it's shallow. The average depth is only 9 feet.
Oh, good. So you just have alligators just out of sight.
Yeah. 730 square miles with an average depth of 9 feet. That seems pretty crazy. Yeah. I had no idea.
You pretty much just bounce your way across it.
Yeah. Yeah, like a hippo.
Right.
All right. Next game. Keep this one rolling here. New York Mets, Houston Astros, Justin Verlander, Framber Valdez. Mets plus 120 on there, 7.5 run total in this one. So kind of interesting spot here. Two good pitchers. I don't know what Verlander has left in the tank now. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on Verlander right now. You and I have discussed him a lot over the past couple of weeks. But you are still talking about a guy that's getting up there in age, in his 40s now. He's got a strikeout rate that's sitting at 21%, which is, average, but it's down 8% 7% from last year, considerably from the year before that. What do you make of Verlander today in a pretty tough spot against Houston?
I think he's really interesting in tournaments since he's not getting ownership and he's only 7,300, pulling 5% ownership. The case that I would make for Verlander is that it's very unlikely, it's not impossible, but it's unlikely that he continues to produce strikeout numbers as low as he is. Last year, he struck out 27.8% of hitters. The year before that, the year before that, he didn't pitch because he was hurt. The year before that, he struck out 33. It's likely that this year's number ends up lower than last year's, but that the gap closes. If you look at projection systems, they agree. The BAT's projecting 25.8% rest of season. ATC is projecting 27. Zips is projecting 26. And if you look at his matchups this year, it makes some sense too. I know I talked about it before, but he had his first start of the year was against Detroit. Second was against Cincy. Those are both solid matchups. He struck out 5 in 5 innings. He struck out 7 in 7 innings. Then he faces Tampa Bay, great offense overall. Faces Cleveland, really tough offense to strike out. Faces Colorado in Coors. Faces Toronto, good offense that also doesn't strike out. Faces Atlanta, and then in his most recent start, 6 strikeouts in 6 innings against the Yankees. That stretch of schedule is likely to knock your strikeout percentage down. So I do still buy into him having a higher strikeout percentage going forward than he has so far this year. Now, this is another relatively tough strikeout matchup against Houston. Their active roster does have a sub 100 WRC plus without Yordan Alvarez, but the middle of this order is still certainly good. And as a whole, they don't really strike out. It's, the bottom of the order will strike out a bit, but tough matchup. But it's just, he's 70. It goes back to Dylan Cease against Texas at 17% owned. Is Dylan Cease clearly underpriced and a good play? Yes. But it's still Texas, and Verlander is pretty clearly underpriced at 7,300 also.
You make some great points, though, when you're getting matchups like that. It is 100% going to skew some of those numbers. His velocity looks pretty much in line with where it was last year. Swing and strike rate's down a little, but that's also going to be a product of of the matchups against teams that don't strike out. So yeah, interesting point there. Who knows? This could be the cheapest you get Verlander all season, or it isn't, and he just stays down there. But yeah, you could see these bounce back games coming. 22% K rate on the active roster, as you mentioned. How about the other side of this one?
Kate Upton. He probably still feels like he's 34 or 35 anyway.
Say it again.
I said the dude's married to Kate Upton. He probably also still feels like he's like 34 or 35.
Yeah. Yeah. You could be right. You think it just like injects?
Yeah, just youth and health.
There's a word I was looking for and I can't think of it. But anyway, Framber Valdez.
Sure. Tough matchup, but 3.5 run implied total or implied run total. Really, really good pitcher, 16% ownership. He's getting less ownership than Kershaw. He's getting less ownership than Cole. Both of those are probably correct. The Mets are a tough team to strike out. They're a solid offense. Against left-handed pitching, their active roster since the start of last year, 116 WRC plus, only a 19% K percentage. Valdez is one of the best at keeping the ball on the ground, limiting power. 26% strikeout percentage this year is up from last year, 2.9 xFIP. Really, really, really good pitcher. 16% ownership makes sense to me. Like less ownership than Kershaw, less than Cole, but still relatively popular.
What about bats for this one? I think it's a little bit tougher to feel great about bats in this game.
Yeah, it's tough to like bats here. If you're going to them, I think the Houston side makes some sense. It's sort of similar to like I talked about on the deeper dive with Josh yesterday when Scherzer was going up against Houston. I was getting a lot of Scherzer and I was getting a lot of Houston because when you look at this pricing, and it's even more so today. I mean, Scherzer was 8,800 yesterday, but if Justin Verlander doesn't give you a good start at $7,300, knowing what we know Justin Verlander's capable of doing, if he doesn't give you a good start at that price, there's a good chance that this inexpensive Houston team that only has one hitter above 5K is doing damage and giving you value. So this is a spot where I wouldn't be surprised at all if I'm getting to Houston for some value and getting to the Verlander side. The big difference between this slate and yesterday, of course, is that it's 11 games instead of 7. So it's not as compact, and it's not as, I wouldn't expect to be getting, as much Verlander as I was Scherzer. I wouldn't be expecting to get as much Houston as I did yesterday, but the same sort of idea applies.
Nathan Eovaldi, Dylan Cease, who you've mentioned a couple times throughout the show. Texas minus 135 in Chicago, 8.5 run total here. Eovaldi, we talked about him 5 days ago. This guy was 10,800 as the highest price pitcher on the slate. Now he's 11-1. It's the highest price he's been all season on DraftKings, Adam, going up against an inferior White Sox opponent. Man, okay. Nathan Eovaldi at 11-1 on an 11-game slate. Is this a viable approach here, given that he's low owned and does have positive leverage with 11.5% top 2 probability, or is that price point kind of prohibitive for you?
I mean, it's prohibitive. It's purely a tournament pivot away from Garrett Cole, Clayton Kershaw, from Valdez. He's getting less than half the ownership of Valdez. He's getting like 1/5 the ownership of Cole, 1/4 the ownership of Kershaw. It's purely a like, this is a large field tournament. Let's just hope Eovaldi throws a complete game and beats out those other guys type play, which you can make, but you're not going to be making it that often. The White Sox have their active roster is the second worst in baseball against right-handed pitching this year, 89 WRC plus, just shy of a 23% strikeout percentage. The matchup is there. It's just that Eovaldi is extremely expensive, and 25.5% strikeout percentage is good. 3.3 xFIP is good, but none of that suggests $11,000. His ability to work deep into games drives up the price point a bit, but it's still tough to pay more for him than for those other guys.
It is interesting seeing Dylan Cease come in at this ownership. Now, on one hand, he's inexpensive. He's got a mid 7K price point. Pretty solid pitcher, obviously good strikeout stuff, but Texas 122 WRC plus against right-handed pitching this season. That's tied for second best in the league behind only the Tampa Bay Rays. 191 ISO for the Texans, or for the Rangers, is also top. I think it's 6th best in baseball. They strike out around a league average clip, but this is a talented offense. So I would say it's feast or famine, but it's not like Texas is striking out at 27%. They're pretty much league average.
It's very similar to his last start where he faced the Dodgers. He gave you a solid start, 23.8 DraftKings points. He struck out 10 guys, which again just goes back to the point that Cease can strike out anybody. He's got about a 26% K percentage this year. But last year was north of 30. You probably see it come up. He has had struggles this year, though. Like, not only is the strikeout percentage down, he's walking 10.7% of hitters, 4.17 xFIP. This is clearly too cheap of a price tag for Dylan Cease. It's kind of similar to the Yu Darvish spot the other day against Tampa, where the matchup's brutal. You don't want to roster the guy here, but if you're going to make Dylan Cease 7,700, you're essentially just erasing all of those question marks and saying, like, yeah, we baked him into the price. Here you go. Now you have this probably really good pitcher at 7,700. So I do think he's a really good play. The only thing I question is what is really driving the gap in ownership between Cease and somebody like Verlander, where you expect Verlander to have a good strikeout percentage going forward. He's facing a team with a 4 implied run total as opposed to 4.5. The Astros' current active roster is below average in terms of production, while the Rangers are one of the best in the league. I get that, Cease is going to project a bit better. His strikeout numbers going forward should still be better than Verlander's. I get all of that, but it's kind of surprising to me that that gap's as big as it is, when at the end of the day, you're just taking two pitchers and saying, all right, they've not been great this year, but I think they're going to be better going forward. And they're not in really good matchups tonight. But then you're just choosing to play a bunch of Cease and like no Verlander.
Over his last 4 starts, 36% K rate, 14% walk rate. So
yeah, and that's reflected in his inability to go deep in the games as well. 4 starts ago against the Tigers, 8 strikeouts, 4 walks. He only went 4 innings. He threw 102 pitches.
Yeah, and 5 1/3 innings on 99 pitches against the Tigers the following start.
5 1/3 against the Dodgers, 102 pitches. And none of this is to say, like, you can't get that 7-8 inning just gem from Dylan Cease. It's there. But when you're walking, it's the opposite of George Kirby. When you're walking and striking out everybody, it does drive up your pitch count, and it does lower how deep into the game you can be expected to go.
It's funny you mentioned Kirby. I was going to say the same thing, because Kirby, 4th fewest pitches per plate appearance. Dylan Cease, among all pitchers, 4th most pitches per plate appearance. Yeah.
But and that is something that, like, I'm definitely bad about it. It's like, that is a big part of a projection as well. And I'm always bad about including that. Like, I talk about strikeout percentage. I talk about run prevention. I don't spend as much time talking about, like, ability to go deep in the games. Cease obviously can. He's not on, like, a short leash in terms of pitch count. It's just he throws so many pitches.
Anything you want to talk about with bats today?
I mean, Texas in tournaments is going to be a decent contrarian play. 5% aggregate ownership. The spot isn't good, obviously. Dylan Cease isn't giving up a lot of power this year. 137 expected ISO to lefties. One other thing I actually hadn't even noticed until just now: 31.7% K percentage to righties for Cease, 21.2 to lefties, and you're probably going to get a pretty lefty heavy lineup here. So again, that number probably comes up going forward, but there's plenty of reasons to be concerned about Cease, even though he is clearly underpriced.
3 games to go here. It's 11 game slate. We got a lot to talk about. Before we do, though, shout out to our sponsor, So Rare. You guys have heard about it. You're collecting digital cards. MLB, of course, they had NBA, but MLB right now, and you're throwing them into lineups, playing against other people, winning cards, able to sell those cards on the marketplace, buy them on the secondary market, create a massive collection. And of course, all of these are created on the blockchain. They're all backed by NFTs. So they are yours. They are yours and nobody else's. They can all be tracked based on the blockchain, NFTs. And you're basically, here's what you're doing. It's a free to play baseball game. Now you can go in there, you get your starter pack, right? Even in the event that, like, you don't plan on spending any money, you get a starter pack. I did it with NBA. It was kind of cool. And then you have all of these, you create your own lineups, you play against other people as you would on any other, like, DFS format. And the higher you rank, the more prizes you win. You can move up from, beginner to higher levels with higher levels of cards that you can win. You can buy whatever you want. All of the cards that you have, you can sell on the marketplace as well. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And I think a lot of people are getting into it because they enjoy having these, knowing that they're theirs, but also that, the more you play them, the more experience points that each card gains, and the more that you can, the more powerful, the more valuable those cards specifically are. Yeah, if you haven't checked it out yet, So Rare. Link is in the description and in chat. You're just competing for rewards with other fans around the world. Buy, sell, trade, collect your favorite cards with complete freedom over at So Rare. Check it out. MLB, NBA, whenever that's back, soccer, all that good stuff over at So Rare. So shout out to So Rare, sponsor the MLB Strategy Show. Link is in the description. All right. And in the chat, Jordan just threw it in there. Ryan Nelson, Con Rhea, Arizona plus 105, 9-run total here in Milwaukee. You want to get to either of these pitchers today?
I can't say that I do.
All right. So let's talk about some bats. Make this one a little bit easier for us. Second highest total on the slate with 9 runs here. Is there a preferred stack for you on either side of this one?
Not by a lot. I slightly prefer the Milwaukee side. Ryan Nelson's allowed a 244 expected ISO with an 11% K percentage to lefties this year. You're in Milwaukee, good park for power to both sides of the plate. Christian Yelich, Jesse Winker, Rowdy Tellez, these guys are all going to look good. Obviously, you can still go to Willy Adames, William Contreras from the right side. Bottom of the order, clearly not as exciting, but there is still some upside here. 4.7 implied run total. And Nelson, again, just really struggling with left-handed power in particular. On the other side, Colin Rea is not a great pitcher. He has done a pretty good job limiting power, about a 21.5% strikeout percentage this year, 153 expected ISO to righties, 162 to lefties. But on the Arizona side, you just have so much talent in the middle of that order. Corbin Carroll in particular, of course, is fantastic, but Ketel Marte is a good second base option. Perdomo, if he's leading off, still doesn't project to be a good hitter, but second base shortstop eligible leading off at a pretty cheap price tag is nice. Christian Walker's got power. Gurriel's got power. Alec Thomas is back up from the minor leagues. He's I don't know if he still is. He was a top 100 hitting prospect. Wasn't great. Got sent back down. Now he's back. He's cheap. At the very least, he's talented. So overall, I just really like the offenses in this game. I do slightly prefer the Milwaukee side.
All right. We got 2 games to go. San Diego, San Francisco, Seth Lugo, Anthony DeSclafani. San Diego minus 115 on the road, 8.5 run total here in a pretty pitcher friendly park, but we can get into this one starting with pitching. Lugo right now in the top stat or in the top pitchers tool, essentially getting no ownership, and rightfully so. I was talking about Texas a second ago. San Francisco has performed really well against right-handers this season. 192 ISO on the active roster, 122 WRC. But essentially the same as Texas across the board, outside of them striking out at a slightly higher clip. So that doesn't look like the best spot at all. And then DeSclafani on the other side, also not getting much ownership against a San Diego team that definitely has some power in it. Can we avoid pitching in this one?
I think so for the most part. Lugo is coming back from the injured list. Not sure how deep into the game he's even going to go. And he's in that price range where, you have Jordan Montgomery. He's in such a deep price range where you have tournament plays already with Verlander and Montgomery. You have good, popular plays with Cease and Savali. I don't really see the reason to get to Lugo in a tough matchup in his first start back from the injured list. On the other side for DeSclafani, decent pitcher, 6,700 is a reasonable price tag. But again, you just have so many other guys you can get to. It's tough to make the case for like an average pitcher that has to face Fernando Tatis and Soto and Machado and Bogarts. I think there's just, better paths. So I don't anticipate getting to either guy.
How about bats here? Decent total in this park.
Yeah, like 4.2 to 4.3 implied run total for both sides. The park suppresses power. It's about league average for run scoring in general. Nothing stands out. It's more so just there's a lot of hitting talent in this game that can always go off. Like I was just saying, I'm not super excited to take bats against DeSclafani. 24% K percentage to righties this year, 151 expected ISO. He has only struck out 12.5% of lefties with a 181 expected ISO. So you're going to look to Juan Soto, Jake Cronenworth, but obviously you're perfectly fine if you get Tatis, if you get Machado, but none of it looks like, I don't know how they fail. It's a tough spot. It's a tough park, but they're just really talented. Same goes for the Giant side. Lugo's a solid enough pitcher, but Lamont Wade, Jock Peterson, Estrada, Conforto, Yastrzemski, a very cheap Luis Matos. There's still a lot of upside here. It's just that it's a tough park and average enough pitching.
Just hit 100 likes. Appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Longer show today, but we're doing our best to get through all 11 games. Anything else in this one before we wrap it up with the Dodgers and Angels?
Nope.
All right. And hey, for those of you guys hanging out with us right now, lineup generator, you guys already know, link in the description and in chat. It's less than $4.50 for the first week. We had a nice little, this is what I love to see. I come in the other day, I wake up, I look at Twitter and I look down and I see in the guard goes, hey, not a full bink or Hall of Fame worthy, but all made possible by the PGA lineup generator. $500, second place in the 10K Albatross. And I go, well, that's not bad. You spent $4.48 for your first week. You plugged it in, you let it run your lineups, you pick the ones you want. You saw the optimal projection. You saw the ownership projection, how chalky, how contrarian every lineup was. You had your choice to lock players in, and you just made $500 on that. And now you're free rolling on the lineup generator for how long? You know, one decent win and you're in business. Not to mention, like if you're playing even $2 a day, you're like, okay, it's $4.48 for the first week for the MLB lineup generator. All right. So that means that I could play $2 a day at 7 days a week. That's $14. I have one decent win. Doesn't even have to be significant. You've already paid for it. And if you don't like it, what do you have to lose? It's $4.48 for the first week. But if you love it, you're looking at it and going, thank God I signed up and at least checked it out. You can set your own stack types too. You can decide. You can run all stacks. You can do 5 3s, 4 4s, 5 2 1s, lock players, upload all of your lineups to CSV if you're on your computer. But also, if you're on your phone, it's optimized for mobile too. And you can save as many lineups, clear and discard as many lineups as you want. We're already running the sims behind the scenes. We're spitting out the top lineups that are showing up as far as optimal projection goes and just hand feeding them to you. You can pick all of the ones you want and set some of your own parameters as well. So $4.48, you want to take that for a test spin. Nothing to lose there. Whether you're playing $5, $2, or $500 a day, MLB lineup generator, awesome tool to have in the toolbox going forward for MLB or for PGA as well. All right, let's wrap it up, Adam. Last one on the docket today. Dodgers and Angels. Kershaw, Reed Detmers, two lefties toeing the rubber. Dodgers minus 145. How much Kershaw do you want to get to today against the Angels?
Yeah, Kershaw looks good. Slightly less expensive than Cole. Tough park, good hitters park. There is obviously dangerous hitters in this lineup. You have Trout, Ohtani. You have a bunch of other right-handed power with Ward, Drury, Renfroe. But overall, solid enough spot for Kershaw. Good pitcher. Still very, very good. Actually has the highest strikeout percentage on the slate at 29%, 3.08 xFIP. Certainly like getting the Kershaw. He is comparable to Cole. We have him projected just behind Cole, like basically a point behind Cole on DraftKings. So makes sense. He's getting a little bit less ownership. Detmers on the other side. He's really talented for a $6,900 pitcher. The problem is just that we have no shortage of guys on this slate that you can say that about. Again, Verlander being one for $400 more. And he's facing the Dodgers, really tough spot. He's another one that typically doesn't go very deep into games. He has struck out 27.7% of hitters this year. That's the second highest on the slate. 3.91 xFIP. Sort of like a cheaper Mackenzie Gore. You can say, like, look, nobody's playing this guy at 6,900, and he's the second best strikeout pitcher on the slate this year. Sign me up. But it's also a really, really tough matchup, and there's just so many other spots you can get to that I doubt I get to too much of him. But in large field tournaments, if you do see him showing up in some lineups, like the ceiling is absolutely there.
Johnny Ray Highway. I've won about 1,500 using the lineup generator. Hey, good stuff, Johnny. Love to see it, man. That's what I'm talking about. You just paid for that for what? As long as you'll need to use it. That's what I'm saying. 1,500, Johnny Ray Highway. Lineup generator. Love it. All right. Bats here. I can't imagine we're getting to a ton from the Angels. Reed Detmer just being one of those guys, though, where he's another guy that can pitch some long innings and could kind of bog down and have trouble working out of jams, or really just getting himself into jams. He's 28% K rate, but walks almost 10% of batters. And he's also only allowing 0.87 home runs per 9. He's one of those guys where it's like he can have great starts, or he just doesn't go deep enough into games, gives up a few runs, and you're not happy with it. But do Dodger bats appeal to you today, just given the little power that he's allowed?
Yeah, I mean, they're still the Dodgers, and they are in a good hitter's park. 4.6 implied run total is one of the highest on the slate because, again, we just have quality pitching pretty much everywhere. So it's similar to yesterday, where that's not to say that teams aren't going to go off, but 4.6, there's a couple of teams like a full run higher, Cincinnati and Cleveland. But other than that, it's one of the highest implied run totals on the slate. Good park. Detmers doesn't give up power, like you said. His numbers against righties this year are very good. 29.5% K percentage to righties compared to 21% to lefties. 127 expected ISO. You can see it if you look at his pitch mix. pretty clearly very, very good with a back foot slider to opposite-handed hitters. He has a nearly 25% swinging strike percentage on his slider to righties. He's throwing it 37% of the time, sub 100 expected ISO. It's just a pitch where it's going to look like the fastball coming in, and then it's going to nearly hit you in the foot as you swing over the top of it, or beat it into the ground. So he has stuff that plays well against opposite-handed hitters. That's why he's able to limit power. But that's his numbers against all righties. That's not his numbers if he had to face Mookie Betts, Will Smith, JD Martinez, Chris Taylor every single time through the order. So still, a high upside spot for the Dodgers just because of who they are.
Looking at this one, who would you say right now are your top two pitchers and top two stacks?
Top two pitchers, probably Cole and Lively.
Lively, huh?
I guess. I don't know. I'm interested to see how it shakes out. I'm interested to do, and I think we're going to do it on the show, but I'm interested to do my Sims video and then, be back for the deeper dive and have a better idea of how my lineups are looking. Because this is a slate where I think there's a lot of very comparable pitchers. I think the ones getting the ownership are the best plays, but I don't think it's by a super wide margin. So I'm kind of interested to see if I end up just kind of eating chalk there or playing more of, say, Kirby and Verlander and guys like that. But in terms of, where I would expect to get to, probably like Cole, Kershaw, Lively.
When you're running these pre-contest sims, how many lineups are you running? Are you running in crunching?
Like for my video?
Yeah.
I did 1,000 yesterday.
1,000? Do you think there's a right number? Because you can do 250, 500, 1,000, 1,500, or 2,000. Do you think, for someone, again, new to this, they just get the simulator, they just got the Sims tool, they want to check it out, and they're wondering if there's any way to optimize it, or is it a lot of preference?
I mean, in general, I think the more you run, the more you can run, the better.
Okay.
Especially if you're talking about wanting to play large field tournaments. If you're playing, a small field, then you could make a case that you should just simulate the tournament basically. But yeah, if you're using it for large field stuff, I would just run as many as you can.
All right, so we got 2,000 here. Let's take a look, man. What do you want to look at first? So I crunched 2,000. We got the pre-contest simulator up. I'm kind of interested to see. And by the way, this is, if you guys who tuned in late, this is the brand new MLB Sims tool. You can run pre-contest and post-contest simulator. See the simulated ROI of everything from stacks to players in the field to users, right? To everything across the board, exposures, you name it. You can favorite everything, export everything. All you're doing is crunching lineups with whatever it is you use, uploading that CSV, and you're in business. You want to look at some stack ROI out of the gate? We were talking about some of these teams.
Yeah. So when you guys made it, did you run different versions of stacks or just make 5-mans or what?
Not for this. It was just 5-man stacks.
Okay.
So you're going to see a few 3-man stacks pop up in there, but it'll just be mostly 5-man, just for the sake of time.
Yeah, that's what I did in mine too.
Okay. If you were doing this, outside of just us doing this as a demo, what would you do? Would you just run a bunch of 5s and then 4 3-1s and 5 2-1s?
So when I create my lineups, I do 5-mans, 5-2s, 5-3s. You can certainly mix in 4-4 and 4-3. That's a spot where I think it's sort of, I don't know the best answer, because if you're trying to really mimic the field, then obviously people are going to be playing 4-4 stacks, 4-3 stacks, smaller than that. But I don't really, in the lineups I play, I don't really want those lineups. So I just basically build lineups that are ownership wise going to be similar to the field, but that I also would want to play in tournaments.
But you're mostly 5-man stacking across all your lineups.
Yeah, on most slates, I am just 5-3, 5-2, or 5 blank.
Gotcha. So right now, 5-man stack ROI in the pre-contest sims, San Diego at 13.3%, Seattle at 11%, Colorado at 10%, and at the bottom, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, and the Cleveland Indians at minus 14.8%.
The who?
I told you, I need 2 years, brother.
Yeah, so I can't even see okay, now I can. Yeah, so the Padres are interesting. I can see that. That was sort of, when we talked about it, there's nothing that stands out about them being a great play because the matchup's mediocre, the park's mediocre, but they still had 4.3 implied run total. They're probably just not going to be all that popular. Right now, we have them being one of the more under-owned teams on DraftKings. 3% ownership projection, 5.5% chance of being the top stack. So certainly can see why they're showing up as one of the top 5 mans.
What do you make of Cleveland Guardians? Pittsburgh makes, obviously it's Pittsburgh, but Cleveland. So out of 2,000 lineups, maybe you can explain this to us before we go. 5-man stack count here is 525, right? So like you said, you're trying to simulate as close to the field as you can. Minus 14.8% ROI right now in the 5-man Cleveland stacks.
Yeah, it's most likely an ownership thing. It's essentially, so like I saw Boss Pro saying Sims got Cole getting beat up. I didn't see where we're at on Cole, but the thing to keep in mind is this isn't telling you what is likely to happen. It's telling you what's going to make you the most money
if it happens.
Right. So like, it's not, in the case of Cole, it's not saying Cole's going to get lit up. It's more so saying when Cole does well, you don't make enough money to make up for the times he gets lit up. So that's
and when Cleveland does well at that ownership,
right,
it's likely not going to be enough. Yeah.
Right. It's essentially saying like, yeah, when Cleveland does well, great. You're most likely going to finish in like 200th place and get, $30 back. And when they do poorly, obviously you're going to suck. So you're better off playing some other team that's not going to succeed as often as Cleveland, but that you're more likely to end up at the top when they do.
Yeah. And just looking at it now, the top simulated, so the top simmed ROI lineups right now, let's see what we have. Oh, wow, dude. Look at number 1. Reed Detmer, Mackenzie Gore. Reed Detmer, Mackenzie Gore. Next time, Jordan, we'll send Adam over the file so we can all look at the same thing. Because it's
going to be different anyway.
What's that?
Even if he sends me the CSV, like the simulation is going to be different on my end.
Okay.
So I can see it once it goes up on YouTube. I just can't see it in Zoom. It's too small, and so I just have to wait for the lag to clear.
Gotcha. Well, you can see it now. And Detmers and Mackenzie Gore up top on a lot of these. Wow. The highest ROI lineups, a lot of them. Ben Lively up there, Valdez Gore, a lot of Mackenzie Gore today, Adam.
Yeah. So this is sort of, I had said when we were talking about the pitchers that I was really curious, kind of how lineups were going to look. Are you playing chalk pitching and then getting different with bats, or is the high upside, low owned pitching close enough in projection that to the popular guys, you're just playing more of them? And at least right now, that's the way this is going. I mean, you do have that third lineup, Cease, Cole, those guys are both popular, and that's going to a Rocky stack, which, that's a low owned stack. But yeah, Detmer's Gore, Valdez Gore. The thing that I really like is that, yeah, you're taking on risk with those pitchers, but there's reward there too, because they're low owned and they're two of the best strikeout pitchers on the slate, speaking specifically about Gore and Detmer. So it at least makes sense. But yeah, the other thing that stands out is just, you're getting a mix that looks good, where you can pretty clearly explain, like, Milwaukee's one of the better stacks and they're paired with 2 low owned high upside pitchers in that second lineup. The Guardians are one of the most popular stacks. So in this lineup, in that top lineup, they're paired with 2 low owned high upside pitchers. That lineup would just have a much lower chance of coming out at the top if you turn Detmers and Gore into, two of the more popular pitchers. So from a roster construction standpoint, these lineups all really make sense.
Tools like this where you can see the pre and post contest ROI and sim everything, where you have the player ROI, stack, exposures, line, all that. It makes it fun to look at. Like, it's actually a fun process to look at all of this. And I must say, it makes me very excited for NFL season.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even you who doesn't love NFL, this type of stuff gets me pretty excited for NFL.
Yeah. I'm always excited for NFL season because there's so much money, but yeah, I'm not excited for the NFL product.
Appreciate you guys hanging out as always. Make sure to hit that thumbs up before you go. Leave a comment if you're listening after the fact. Subscribe to the channel. Follow Adam at Ship My Money DFS. Me at Lafayette_D. And shout out to Jordan Klein for producing this one. We'll catch you back here for the next one. Peace.